November 29th, 2025. Well, the big thing in the news lately has been the shooting of the two National Guard members in D.C. Um, by a Afghan national who was brought into the U.S. Under a program to basically spare people from Afghanistan that had served with the U.S. in some capacity to assist us or somewhat during that long war in Afghanistan. And so this is a bit of a smack in the face, to say at least, the U.S. for him to do something like this individual. Um, now, and of course, this has turned into kind of a major thing. Obviously, Trump is using it as a pretext, and maybe a reasonable one, to fully review the vetting of all these people coming up from countries where we do have terrorist problems and the sort. They've been coming into the country, and that's certainly reasonable. And I guess, on the other hand, I would have to say I have a few other thoughts on this whole thing as well. First of all, people are talking about, was this individual vetted or not? Well, he actually worked with the CIA in a counterterrorism effort that we were organizing in Afghanistan. So this isn't like somebody we didn't know who it was. Now, a lot of what they're talking about and what President Trump is talking about is there's over 100,000 people brought in very rapidly, and many of whom simply managed to get on an airplane that may not have had any association with the U.S. War in Afghanistan at all. They simply were in Kabul when they did the big evacuation, and somehow they got in, and we were loading up all kinds of people on airplanes, and people were even hanging on to airplanes as they were taking off. And it was a really disorganized bunch of nonsense. And of course, it's impossible to really vet these people properly because we don't even know who they all were. And of course, that's what he's referring to primarily. And on this, he's 100% correct. That was a disastrous withdrawal, the way it was handled, and I think everybody, except maybe a hardline Democrat, is going to agree with this. However, when we get into the specifics here, we have somebody that, unless the CIA simply failed to inform the FBI and the people doing the vetting that this person was questionable, which I don't think they did, and I don't think he necessarily would have been counted that way. I tend to think this is kind of a surprise that this individual did what he did. And so, I mean, not to say much about him, obviously, now he's committed murder. And since Sarah Beckstrom has died of the gunshot wounds, we get into that a little bit also. The other individual involved, I think his name, Staff Sergeant Wolf, I think is his last name. I forget his first name. But at any rate, he's, as of this recording, in critical condition. We can only hope he fully recovers. As again, the details of his wounds aren't known. I think they said he was hit in the neck, and depending on the angle on that could be quite bad. So, at any rate, this has become a big thing. And of course, the left apparently again is trying to blame Trump, and I'll try to answer most of these things here. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, or alternatively, you can follow me on Rumble and address in the description below. So yes, first of all, I mean, I tend to think this individual was actually vetted as much as anybody's going to be if he'd actually had been working with the CIA on operations. And I would also point out that this, as a terrorist attack, this doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, he was living in the state of Washington and drove clear across the country to attempt to murder a couple of, and killed one National Guard member. Why that? I mean, if you want to commit a terrorist attack in the United States, if he was a secret Taliban or Al Qaeda, I think he could have done a lot more damage, even back in the West Coast. I mean, why? One almost would tend to think he had become kind of a Democrat follower and listened to their propaganda and thought this would be something to do, since they seem to be wanting to do any kind of crazy thing possible, including they have people shooting at immigration ICE agents and stuff on occasion, and running vehicles into them. and their rhetoric has stirred this up. I don't mean to say they directly ordered any of this, but this is what you call stochastic terrorism, and using their own term. You put out enough heat, and some mentally unstable person reacts to it. So that's one way of looking at this. I don't know if that's it. I mean, we'll have to figure out if he does live and is interrogated. Maybe we'll find out what his motivations is. I mean, there's a full press law enforcement investigation led by the FBI, and if any detail can be ascertained, it probably will be. I don't know if he left a manifesto, or maybe he's illiterate and couldn't leave a manifesto. I don't know about that. But the point is, this was for by any standard, a completely insane, off the wall attack. Okay, and we have the greatest possible sympathy for the parents of Sarah there and the other guardsmen. Of course, anybody that's in law enforcement or in the military have basically signed up to put their life on the line to protect the rest of us, and they were doing that duty. The fact is that the National Guard presence in D.C. has apparently reduced overall crime level about 30%, apparently, from what it was before Trump deployed them, and the murder rate's down 60%. So a lot of American lives have been saved by the presence of the National Guard there, and has made the area relatively more safer than it was. And one of the big problems when you complain about the use of the National Guard, the Washington, D.C. police is way under strength compared to what it should be, because most people that want to be policemen don't want to be a policeman under the government that you have in Washington, D.C., which is basically pro-criminal in many ways. So, at any rate, so they have that situation. I suppose a appropriate review of people, but I have a feeling that this individual would have been missed in almost any review, because he'd be one of the people you'd be more trusting of, since he had a significant involvement actively in our effort in Afghanistan. And remember that the whole rationale for any of these people being here is that they very well might be killed by the Taliban if they were back there. And so you're going to have a problem with the court system, particularly of trying to deport these people, because at this point, anybody that they deport, even if they didn't work for the U.S. military or intelligence in Afghanistan during the war, will still be considered people that defected to the United States, and probably the Taliban would hold them all in low regard. So that's something we're going to run into there. And anyway, that's kind of my assessment of the situation. In this specific case, yes, I'm all for proceeding the full extent of the law possible, including the death sentence. Which adds to another thing I'd like to bring up, which kind of came to my mind during this whole thing. It's kind of been a little bit of a pet peeve of me for a while. Remember when initially, after the attack was reported, Sarah's condition was unknown, and she was critically wounded, because this person not only shot her with a revolver, but after she was on the ground, and I guess the other individual, Sergeant Wolf, was wounded, and probably to the point he could not respond. He then took her weapon away from her, her handgun, and shot her in the head with it. So this is clearly a full-scale premeditated murder. And my question is, but the idea was floated around, we're waiting around, if she dies, then they won't be able to propose as serious a charge as we would if she lived, probably brain damage for the rest of her life. And so I'm sitting here going, I don't agree with that. To me, if you really clearly have attempted to murder somebody and simply failed because the paramedics got there in time, the doctors in the hospital were skilled and saved their life, versus somebody that probably wasn't brought to medical care in time and happened to die. In one case, you want the death sentence. The other case, you just want maybe 20 years in prison or something. I don't agree with that. To me, that the punishment should be equal, and it should be equally severe as if the person had died, if it's clear that the person fully intended the person to die with their action. And simply following up the initial shot by then seizing a weapon and shooting point blank in the head, they meant for the person to die. And of course, in this case, it did. But the point is, regardless of that outcome, I think they should still got the same punishment. I think that's a kind of a defect in our legal system. Okay, so that's sort of my little soapbox on that one. But I wanted to say that. The other comment I have is maybe it's time to issue rifles to the National Guard there. or particularly the M4 carbine would be the standard weapon today. And I think in that urban environment, certainly preferable, because basically with that, you wouldn't. I mean, if you're patrolling around with a handgun, either the M9 or the new M17, in a whole military style holster, and you're hit with a surprise ambush, the ability to draw that weapon and return fire quickly may be a problem. Whereas if you had a M4 on a tactical swing, around the chamber, safety, set to safe, you can quickly with your thumb click that to semi-auto and return fire very quickly. And maybe the second person, let's say the sergeant there, might have been able to have got off a round on the guy before he got hit, hypothetically. So I'm just saying, I'm not saying that's true, but I'm just saying that might give the National Guard a little bit better safety while doing this mission, and a little bit more deterrence than any would-be people that want to directly attack them. So that's kind of my thinking on that one. And so, at any rate, the other thing that's come up is that apparently the ongoing situation in Ukraine war. I don't know. It looks like the Europeans have been trying to sabotage Trump's peace plan that I discussed in my previous video, which for some reason not enough people have looked at, in my opinion. But check it out. Just go to my site, and it'll be the previous video. But I think that they're trying to sabotage it, and we'll see what happens. I know that Zelensky's top, I guess his chief of staff, or whatever, his number two, apparently has just resigned as part of the corruption scandal, and there seems to be a little bit of dissension between that and other people in the hierarchy who aren't currently in the country. There's been negotiations in the Middle East about this, and now I understand that Trump's representatives are going to go visit Putin next week. So trying to negotiate a deal, but it seems to me like, from my opinion, the Ukrainians have really rejected Trump's primary offer, because essentially, if you're unwilling to cede land that's been conquered under any conditions, then pretty much you've rejected the core of the thing, and you still insist on wanting to be in NATO and so forth, which means they only want to drag us into a war with Russia, which I don't think is a good idea. And it looks like that we'll see whether or not we can possibly get a peace deal here or not. I'm a little skeptical given the pushback from Ukraine. There's also an interesting question whether or not we've somehow instigated these corruption investigations to weaken the Zelensky regime at the same time, because obviously we've known they've been corrupt for a long time. I don't think that's any surprise. So at any rate, so that's kind of it for this week, and I was going to this half week, and I'll be posting this as always on YouTube and Rumble, and the description, my addresses, my social media accounts are in the description below. So all for now.